Far away, but not long ago, saw a man with a golden soul. He saw no right, but he spoke no wrong. He wrote no writ, but he sang no song. Today is the day said to me, I'll cut your chains and I'll set you free. Now there ain't no one to tell you how to fight your fight or to take your bow. But lo, behold, it ain't so nice. A lot of long car rides, a lot of cold nights. 'Cause it ain't that easy being free from yourself when you ain't got no one, no books on your shelf. And now you see I'm free from sin, from love, from pain, or any trouble I've been in. But who needs trouble when you got love? But then, who needs love? It's too much trouble for some.
Hi, folks, and welcome back to Cigarettes, Coffee, and Christ. I am your host, Thaddeus Paul Collins, and we have a special episode. I got my buddy Ethan Moore from the podcast Mean and Sober here. He agreed to come on, and we're just going to, shoot the shit. We're going to catch up on some election stuff, maybe talk about a few things, and we'll see where it goes. I'm using some new software and stuff here, so Ethan, welcome to my little pod here.
Well, thanks, Thad. It's quite an honor. Yeah, man, it's cool to be here. You and I have known each other since, Jesus Christ, like it's been, maybe we met each other in like 2004 or something. I don't know.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah.
Ethan and me have some history. We used to live together and kind of run around together.
Yeah, we were gay lovers. That's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, that's correct. Never went that far, but much to my chagrin. But we've both struggled. You guys know, you've heard me talk. We've both been through an addiction struggle and both came out the other side, and so that's something that we've both had to deal with.
Yeah, you've been sober for what, like 5-6 years, something like that now?
Going on 6. I kind of started to lose track a little bit, but I know you're not supposed to do that. But it's been a while now, yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, and it's been more than that even for me, and I ended up going through and still am part of a 12-step group, which you're not supposed to say like which one according to
I
the
know
rules.
the rules, yeah.
But I definitely am part of a 12-step community and like see and work with people who are trying to stay sober like all the time, and that's been like super helpful to helping me stay sober, and definitely created a spiritual dimension in my life too that was seriously lacking.
Yeah, I wanted to, maybe we'll touch on that since it kind of came up. I'm not going to go into all that, but yeah,
Well, you're a Christian now.
I am. I was
But
raised.
You weren't back then.
No, I wasn't. We kind of had similar upbringings. No, I was very far from it.
We were both pretty atheistic and nihilistic way back when we lived together in Berkeley.
Yes, exactly. And we were both liberals back then too, which is interesting. So.
And I'm still a liberal in some ways. I don't know what I am. People accuse me of all kinds of things these days.
I kind of don't like the labels anymore either, because I don't know. I started this pod kind of going on the anarchist thing, and now I don't even know what that word means anymore. So I know I'm not those guys tearing up the towns and everything. So but
You're like a Tolstoy anarchist. You're like a Tolstoy anarchist, like a Christian anarchist.
Very much.
If you're an anarchist.
Anarcho-Christian, and a lot of that came from. I did come back to. You and me were both raised Christian. I believe we're both in the Baptist type camp, correct? Presbyterian,
Oh yeah,
somewhere in there. So the low church cucks
hard,
we are.
hardcore low church cuckery. That's
Yeah,
right.
that's us.
Yeah, Southern Baptist, but independent Southern Baptists in my case. Like the Southern Baptists were considered liberals where I came from.
Okay, we were
So
kind of
you go
on the
far.
conservative side of things here, but yeah, I fell away for a long time, and my addiction is something that I did go through a Christian program, and I did come back to God or whatever you want to call it. Um, Now you're not definitely not like a Christian or anything, but I've heard you say on your pods that God did help you through your addiction in some form, correct?
Yeah, I'm a theist. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. I believe in God. And I didn't really when I went into recovery first. It's like with the 12 steps. It's like God is in there. Like your higher power.
Yeah.
And at the time, like when I got sober all those years ago, I felt like I was at my wit's end, and I tried all my like, intellect and abilities and everything like that, and it ultimately it got me like a certain amount of things, but it didn't make me happy. And it certainly like if you wanted to know why I wasn't happy, it's like the fact that I was like constantly drunk or on drugs. Um, Not usually a very happy person, and but still like like fairly successful outwardly, which was always kind of weird, I think, for
Yeah.
people.
Well, you were always seemed very successful on top of things to me, even though I knew you, kind of in all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was in grad school when we
Yeah.
met. Yeah, and I always managed to maintain a veneer of respectability, I guess, on some level. Um, but inside, it's like that the American Psycho, but inside,
Oh,
you know.
yeah. Yeah.
So so anyway, I ended up, at my wit's end, and I felt like there wasn't really I didn't know what to do. And I reached out and asked for help, and all of a sudden, like there was something there helping me that I couldn't explain. So that was kind of where it started, um, with theism for me. And at the time, I really understood it in like spirit of the universe, like pantheist kind of like, as close as you can still be kind of believing in God, but still call yourself an atheist or just barely call yourself a theist. I was kind of on that level. Like I was like, well, God is everything, and we're God, and like
Yeah.
God is in like, the spoon of heroin, and God is in the Holocaust, and God is in,
Mm.
the tear of every baby or whatever. Like it was like God is in like all the bad things and all the good things, and God is everything, and then like but maybe God really appears in the relationships between people and the connections we have with each other. So that was kind of like as far as I could go with it. But it really, um, when I studied religion in grad school, and I kind of got back into mythology through watching like Jordan Peterson videos like a
Yeah.
few years ago, and his stuff on God and the Bible and all that kind of stuff, the psychological approach. And that really kind of like, I think that opened me up at just the right time in my recovery and in my spiritual journey to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's more than one kind of truth here. Like maybe on some kind of like reductionistic, materialistic like view, like there isn't a God, but like maybe that's actually not the deepest view that we can have of reality. Maybe there's a much deeper view that's only told by like myth. So yeah, that changed my perspective.
Well, I think the word myth or mythical gets kind of a negative connotation as it, people associate it with not being real or fairy tales. But as Peterson said, and I read this incredible book, Waking the Dead, that deals with how myth, even in movies and culture and all this, is very real in a lot of ways. And I use the term Christian because I do believe in the resurrection, but I have a lot of problems with Christianity and with churches. I think I think everything got a lot more complicated, and I heard on one of your pods. Thanks for you gave me a little shout out. Thank you for, and you're talking about that I had a narrow view of the Bible is the words you meant. But no, not. I don't take it as a bad way.
I don't remember what I said, so I'm just like, oh
No,
my God, did I fucking throw that under the bus? I don't remember
no, you didn't at all. But I was more thinking I do have a very simple view of the Bible. I think it
Well,
encompasses a lot, but I think we're focusing on the wrong things. What Christianity has been doing for a long time now. I think we've been getting hung up on these wrong things and losing focus on loving everyone and what that really means. And I've been really trying to take that to an actual level. Like, what does it really mean to love everyone and to not judge and to not, so that's why I'm still in a lot of ways very like pro gay marriage. I get a lot of heat because I'm pro choice, by default, because free will is a gift God gave us. But
hmm
rambling a little bit, but
right.
so in these last few years, I've been really trying to figure out what the Bible, actually says about some things, and a lot of it, like even hell and eternal, torture and all these things I'm finding aren't really biblical. So I'm
Yeah.
just having a lot of issues with what Christianity as a whole, kind of how it interprets the Bible and how, especially in this country, how we exhibit Christ's loves, and I see a lot of issues with that right now.
Well, I think maybe and I'm remembering now, maybe what I was reacting to is, and I appreciate your like, your real like thirst to like understand like what is Scripture, like what does it mean? What is it actually trying to say to us? I think that's, it's nice to see that. I think a lot of people don't really have that these days, um, and I think that, but it also, when I said narrow, I mean, it sort of reminds me, because when I was a kid, it was many, many, many sermons where the pastor would be up there, and it's obviously a Protestant, view of things, and he's sort of like giving his take on some like arcane reading of these specific words in the King James Bible or something,
Which is a
and
horrible translation. Sorry.
well, it's beautiful and it's nice for like liturgical
Yeah.
purposes and things like that, and I like the King James translation, but but it's not very accurate. I mean, of course, yeah. So and we were not King James fundamentalists. Like they would try to go back and say, well, here's the Hebrew root or here's the Greek root, and we think it means this, and so they had some. But it's not the kind of training that, like, let's say, like a Catholic priest would have, or an Orthodox priest would have in terms of, a real body of work going back like thousands of years in an attempt to like uncover what this means for the Christian community. And, and I think so I have problems with Catholicism and with traditional Christian forms, but I also have problems with Protestantism, and I think that it sometimes I feel like it gives individuals a little bit too much weight to interpret things on their own and
Oh,
try to,
okay.
and everyone gets caught up in these like weird little things, and it's like, you know you're like, well, I think what you were saying, something about like Joel Osteen is interpreting this, but actually this verse means this other thing, and like my perspective on that would be like, well, there's maybe like I think you're right about a lot of like what you're saying about Joel Osteen or like those types of sort of prosperity gospel kinds of people. Like, this, I don't think that the Christian message is like God wants us to be rich and like thereby spread Christianity by like how rich we are and how much everyone envies us or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
know exactly what they say, but I still don't think that it's like, also, I don't think you need to like find some specific scriptural reading from like one verse or something to like find that. I think there's got to be like some kind of like overall animating spirit in the message of Jesus that's
Um, I
antithetical to that.
I
Does that
agree
make
with
sense?
you 100% there, and I actually am a big proponent of looking at the narrative as a whole, and I think that's a big thing, a problem with Christianity today in a lot of these churches is I was working, living, playing on the worship team at a very big, almost mega church, had like 5 campuses, and the messages were like bumper stickers. It was just these single little verses, and it's just these tiny little things. And I never like necessarily caught anything that I found to be against the word. It was just very simple. It was very dumbed down, which I guess is kind of contradictory to what I just said about trying to keep it simple. But it wasn't taking like the narrative as a whole. I think you do have to look at the whole story of the redemption of the Jews and this whole narrative that led to Jesus and afterwards. And I think that is a huge problem. Like with Romans 13, that's got to be the most misused, quote. That's the one Paul's talking about, the authority of state and how everyone needs to succumb to the authority, and politicians and Hitler have always used this verse that says, respect all state authority, respect all this,
Yes. Okay.
and everyone quits
kind
reading.
of back it up with the render unto Caesar.
Exactly, which is, these are all non-congruous things. I mean, they're separate things, and a lot of Paul. Well, I have a whole thing on it. We don't have to go into that, but Paul was saying something else there. We are supposed to be, respectful to authority, but never to the point of going against our own faith or anything like this,
Yes. Well, otherwise we wouldn't have martyrs.
Well, yeah. The Bible's very clear about times where we're allowed to disobey authority, and it happens. So, like the very next verse after the one everyone quotes is, love everyone as your neighbor. There is no law higher than this. He reiterates what, Jesus said. Jesus boiled down, the 10 Commandments into 2, love God, love others. And I'm trying to get more to a place like that where,
Well, I think that the other thing that bothered me about the religion that I grew up in, and that still bothers me about sort of whatever you want to call it, like kind of not Baptist, but Protestant. I'll say, I don't know, I'd say like maybe a more like conservative or like fundamentalist kind of Protestant interpretations of the Bible is that it's very static. It wants to say, this is what the Bible says. This is what Christ's message means. And I have a hard time with that, because I think that like the true meaning of, Christ is something that is like actually is an unfolding process in, you know what I mean?
I'm with you 100%. Yeah.
Because Christ spoke in aphorisms, right? He didn't really speak and say, here's exactly what it is. And then and I think even St. Paul he's going about the business of articulating it in a specific terms for like that time. And so I'm skeptical. So I have a little bit of skepticism about St. Paul, but I have even more skepticism when you start to build specific interpretations on, Paul or on someone that came later and say, like, this is actually what the Christian message is, and we can see, look at this verse right here, that tells us the answer. I'm suspicious of people who think they have the answer.
Well, I'm a big fan of Paul, but I also see what you're saying. This is something I struggle with, is Paul was just a man. I get stuck with the Christians that say the Bible is infallible and every word of it is infallible, because I honestly just don't know. I mean, Paul was just a man. The Gospels, the words of Jesus, I feel like I can take pretty solid, but when you start getting outside that, I can't say that Paul never made a mistake or got something a little wrong,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know enough about, how infallible this book is. I do know it wasn't written to us. I do know it was written to people thousands of years ago, and I do think that has to be taken into context.
Well, see, and that's where the Catholics have one over on the Protestants, because they have a tradition of interpretation through an authority that traces itself back to the early church. So they're able to have that interpretive process going on, and they're saying, well, the Pope is speaking ex cathedra, and so now he's actually saying, here's what the interpretation is, like the Supreme Court interpreting the Constitution or something like that. Well, maybe that's not a great analogy, but
no, but
you see what I mean?
I do, and I think that's a nicety. I mean, I think that's a nice way to do religion, but in a lot of ways, that's what Jesus came to get rid of. When people talk about
that's Judaism also.
Well, the resurrection and all that, people, whether you think that was real or not, that's fine. But a big part of that was the tearing of the veil, which meant that the barriers between man and God were torn down. We no longer had to go to the temple. We no longer had to have a human mediator between, us and God, basically. So Catholicism, it almost seems like they're doing the same thing, where the priest gives you your lessons. The priest, you go to him for confession or absolution or whatever. And I think that fundamentally is a lot of what Jesus was trying to get rid of. I mean,
Yeah.
the act, or according to the Bible, that miraculous act, one of the things it did was tear down a lot of those barriers. And I feel like, the church never meant a physical body. If you look at a lot of the definitions and what a physical, place, it was the body of Christ was the church. And so when we started putting that back into a temple and back into a box, I think that was maybe not what he was intending, but.
Well, I don't know, and I'm not a Catholic either, so but I see some benefits and some drawbacks, I guess. I guess I also try to think about religions in terms of evolution. I think about them in evolutionary terms, because I think that the forms that are adaptable and useful and make us better as human beings will survive. And the ones that don't do that, then, religion is about deriving meaning from life. And if you have a religious form that doesn't work to give people meaning, or is like corrupt and like destructive, then like it sort of sows the seeds of its own destruction inside it. And whereas if you have something that's sort of persisting for a long period of time, you sort of figure there's something to this. It could always be corrupt, and anything could always be corrupt, and everything's going to be imperfect, of course. But so I don't know, and I don't have a strong opinion about like Protestantism versus Catholicism.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm impartial.
You're kind of an outside observer.
Yes. I'm a poll watcher.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll have to get to that crazy shit in a minute.
Let me bring up something though that irritates me though about the way that I'll put it this way: the way that the world often views Christianity, and I guess you can see what I mean by the world. From the context, it'll be really clear. Yeah, so I find it to be like particularly offensive, I guess maybe is one word. So yeah, you'll hear this really common thing from especially, I said, the way that like the world looks at Christianity, and and you can hear it from the right too, in terms of like people trying to interpret, it's an appeal to authority, really. It's saying like, this is what the Bible says, or this is what Jesus says. But the interesting thing about the appeal to authority from the left is that it's always in bad faith. So they'll say things like, Jesus was actually a socialist, or Jesus was about everyone's equal, or Jesus was about anti-racism, or whatever, some modern form of like corrupted ideas about like today's politics and what they should look like. And so Jesus was actually a socialist is like a really common thing that you hear. And
because he wanted to feed the poor. That's what they're getting that from.
Right. And so it's like, first of all, this kind of appeal is always coming from someone who's not a Christian. Almost exclusively. And it's almost the same way that you hear like Bill Maher or someone be like, the Republicans are gay. They're like, you know what I mean? Like they're basically saying like it's like a weird thing, because they're basically like, being homophobic is bad, but I'm going to use it against you like that. It's like being Christian is bad, but I'm going to like still use it against you. It's like, yeah. So you hear that all the time, and that's something about that really bothers me, because of course, like, it's just the same kind of fundamentalist interpretation that I would hear, except it doesn't even have the benefit of people who actually like believe this stuff trying to like make their lives better. You know?
Fundamentalism too is pretty recent.
Yes.
That's like the 1930s. I did an episode on that. I'm a big fan of science. I think we're billions of years old and millions of years old, and I think humans, and most Christians weren't don't mean to go off topic, but I just mean when fundamentalism came in and we started, that was a big problem. We started like interpreting Genesis as literal when that wasn't really a thing before, you know. Reverends commented on Darwin's book saying this is a great addition to the story of creation. Christians, like between, you know, when Darwin wrote Origin of the Species in like the 1820s, 1830s, until like the 1930s, for the most part, Christians, you know, they were academics, they were scientists, they were teachers at Harvard, and then this fundamentalism thing came in and it brought a lot of like literal, very closed boxed interpretations to the Bible that really weren't there before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also we know that Christian fundamentalism kind of has as its core like a an an early view of what science was like a Francis Bacon kind of view of science, so that we can understand what the natural world is, and it's all very empirical, and we can figure it out, and we can know it, and that the Bible, then of course, the way that they look at it is just another source of information about scientific truth about the world, you know, rather than saying that like, well, the Bible is like something that we're trying to understand so that we can derive meaning from our lives. Instead, they treat it like a science textbook or something like
Exactly,
that.
and I think
because it
that's
must be literally inerrantly true. So therefore, like 6,000 years ago, dinosaurs and human beings were together. You know, it's like the anti-evolution stuff and all that kind of sort of
well,
what I would say is nonsense.
well, that 100%. That's what kept me
Yeah.
away from Christianity for a long time because I thought I had to believe that the world was created in 72 hours or whatever, and the entire universe and stars was all done in a time frame that is only applies to us on this planet. I mean, you can even go to other planets. I mean, for this such a constrictive time to put on we like to say how immense and infinite and powerful God is, but then we boxed him into this very human calendar system of days, which I just always
Right.
had an issue
Well,
with the
yeah.
anti-science aspect of a lot of
Well, and
Christianity.
I think there's an anthropocentrism there that actually is like there's a reason that that's there. I mean, it's the idea that the message of you know the Hebrew Bible and also the New Testament are messages for human beings. You know, right? This is a revelation to us. Um, Right, so that's I think there, but like saying that therefore, you know, you can interpret something written in that language as if it were like a science textbook about how the entire universe is structured is like problematic, maybe,
Yeah, I,
you
I
know?
I think it is, and I think then people ask me, well, do you think Genesis is a allegory or a lie or something, you know, in there? And I think God's a very good communicator. I think that he knew there weren't molecular biologists and there weren't scientists around. I mean, I think God understands we're going to learn and grow and evolve, like you were saying, and science will, you know, kind of keep up with humans as like we evolve and understand more about his world. And I think that was a story given to people at a certain time to convey the message of this being that created everything. I could be way off on
Mhm.
that, but I think it was,
Well, it's a myth, right? And
yeah,
I think, you
yes.
know, and this is, I mean, I was studying this in grad school right way back when we lived together. Um, Mircea Eliade, you know, who's a Hungarian historian of religions, and he wrote about myth. And this was one of the reasons why I think when I heard Jordan Peterson, I was like, he's talking about Eliade, you
Oh,
know, and I
okay.
was like, wow, I haven't heard anyone talk about this since like graduate school or college, you know, and I was so super interesting. But what Eliade says is he says we'll never say, you know, it's just a myth because a myth is the truest kind of thing that there is. You know, in
Wow.
other words, like mythology is true on a deeper level than scientific truth. And I think it's important for us to remember that all scientific truth is grounded in some sort of larger, deeper way of knowing. You know, and if you
Okay.
want to really understand that, then all you need to do is think about the fact that, you know, science grew out of theology, right? I mean, you did
Yes.
not have, yeah, I mean, science is something that's depending on, you could set the date, if you want, you could go to Aristotle, but that wasn't really what we call science. I think you have to go back to, maybe Bacon and Descartes and those kinds of, that's sort of the origins of science, I think, and the Enlightenment and all those kinds of thoughts. And that all was grounded in theology, attempts to understand God's creation. And it's something that has a pedigree that goes back maybe 400 years, whereas religion goes back as far as long as religion has been with us as long as we've been conscious, probably. So 50,000, 75,000, 100,000
Yeah.
years, maybe we don't know exactly. And I think that consciousness is what makes us human, and I think that religion is what makes us human, and I think the two are inextricably linked in a way that we don't usually give credit to. And mythology is a way of addressing that, deep human consciousness and our relationship with God and the world. And sure, science is a way of knowing, and it's a way of knowing that's very impressive. It can show us all kinds of interesting things, but it certainly isn't the answer. And this is also like we talk about misreadings of Jesus and saying he must have been a socialist. This is like misreadings of science and people saying, well, I fucking love science and all that kind of shit, that whole crowd, and it goes directly to the coronavirus stuff, which I know you've talked about quite a bit, where people would just pull up the latest study that they found on Google that proves their particular view on things, which is like either we should be locking down more, we should be locking down less, coronavirus, Donald Trump is the greatest killer of human beings since Adolf Hitler,
Yeah.
or Donald Trump is our salvation, or whatever it is, and they just pick whatever is their view and then just post that, and they're like, see, science, and it's like, no, like your reasoning function is like this gloss on top of like what you just really want to be saying. And science, if it isn't properly grounded in some kind of system that actually believes in like human good and human flourishing, right, and human meaning and developing our meaning, it doesn't tell us where to go. It just tells us the answer to a question, but we have no idea what the question is.
Yeah.
It could be a very dangerous question, or a very arbitrary question, or a very useless question.
It's very sterile.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, science can tell you how to, create a virus that will kill a lot of people.
Yeah.
Science can tell you how to create a hydrogen bomb. I mean, science can help tell you to cure cancer. I mean, science can do all kinds of different things. So, not asking the question of what questions are we going to ask science is a big mistake that people are making all the time when they're doing their reasoning. And with the coronavirus thing, I mean, I think it's very frustrating to see people, reason it in terms of saying, well, like, if you do policy X, then like this many lives will be saved. And there was never any real reckoning with what the opportunity costs were for that. There was never any reckoning with what's the opportunity cost of, shutting down a state or a society and telling everyone to go home, and then we'll send you a check. Like how depressed do people get? How many of them do drugs and commit suicide?
Well,
And also, if you put masks on, which I'm not anti-mask.
no,
Maybe masks are good.
you're good.
I'm talking a lot. I'm talking a lot here, Pat.
No, please.
Stop.
You got a lot. You're better with words than I am. I'm still kind of learning to do this, so I'm loving to hear it.
Okay. Well. I don't know anything really. I'm just this fucking nightclub comic who also
Yeah.
like is interested in ideas. Um, but anyway, I think with science, with masks, right? Like the thing that I've heard zero people talk about this, and I think it's huge, is human beings evolved to be able to see each other's faces,
Yes.
so that you can see the expression on someone else's face. And when you cover up everyone's face, and now you're in a room full of people who you can't see the expression on your face, well, we haven't evolved to process that. We don't know how to behave. And so what it does is it creates an ambient level of anxiety. I'm not autistic, but I imagine it's the way that autism is described, where someone can't interpret the people's facial expressions, and so they constantly feel anxious and uncomfortable. And I don't know what that does. I don't know, does that shorten people's lives? Does that make people more prone to violence or depression? I mean, I imagine it does. Like, it's a good guess that it does. And no one is saying, well, we should factor that into our equation about like what particular policy preferences to make. And so science is kind of a really blunt instrument. Even statistical analysis is kind of a blunt instrument if you don't tell it what questions to ask.
Okay. Yeah, and the corona thing just sent me in every which way. I was at first super angry. I knew like the numbers weren't adding up. Then I knew that people were dying, and then I don't know. It was tough on me. And I heard you bring up this point about the facial things on your pod, or maybe the bonus, and I'm glad you re-brought it up here. I witnessed firsthand what it did to people when they were locked up and then let out, and I can't quantify like how many lives saved versus how many people lost their minds. But as I've said in a few pods and stuff, I'm at this resort. I work and live at this resort on the lake, and when everyone was let out for whatever reason,
you're a coastal elite.
Yeah. It's a little muddy hole up in the mountains, but I'll take it. And but I've never seen insanity like this. I never seen people act like this. We weren't slow because of the shutdown. We were running out of food every day. We had every single boat. Everyone had this almost violent feeling of we had to get out. We had to get out. I mean, there were fights here I'd never seen before. There are 12-man brawls in our parking lot. I mean,
yeah.
I still can't put my finger on what it did to people, but I think, it ties in with something. This was before the masks and everything, but something about that act of locking people up like that and then letting them out. I don't know the science behind it, but I seen just firsthand the insanity, just this mania, this insanity, almost violent at times, and just I never seen anything like it.
And we saw this, and it was sort of something that John and I talked about on Me and Sober on the podcast, many times. And he and I were for once in agreement about something, which was how silly it was, and also about this, which is that, okay, if you are going to lock people up in their homes, eventually something bad is going to happen. People are going to find a reason to get out of their homes. And you saw it. You saw the first thing that happened was a bunch of people after like 3 weeks or whatever, who were like more like on the Trump side and kind of on the like freedom, Second Amendment and all that kind of stuff side, where they were marching, and we saw, vast condemnation from people on the left saying how irresponsible that was. And then, but of course I knew that at that time, I was like, yeah, but like if you lock everyone out, eventually people aren't going to comply. And by the way, epidemiologists said that at the beginning, right? They said people they'll do lockdown for a certain period, and then all of a sudden they'll just stop doing it. And they needed a reason. And what reason was like the perfect reason? Well, it was like, white supremacy, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and then that became something that people could say, well, this is a morally acceptable reason in order to like be able to leave my house. And it it trumps the like science side of things. And so you see there with this role that like science is playing, where it's, it certainly is not like the arbiter of all truth. Morality, it's people's feelings about morality is always going to be more important. So like that's why. Anyway, well, this is like a huge topic, so I don't know how much time you want to spend on it. But it just, of course, we knew. As soon as I saw people rioting and burning and marching in the streets, I was like, well, we knew this was going to happen. And I remember posting something about how this isn't really about George Floyd.
Well, yeah.
And boy, do people not want to hear that.
No.
They're like, of course it's about George Floyd. I'm like, this is about the lockdown.
I've said similar things, and I've met resistance from friends and family that, even in I'm saying these wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the lockdown. I think you and I are both in agreement that was this catalyst that just unleashed everything. I mean, my fear and anxiety, and I try to be fairly rational. And I think I've tried to bring that up too, that this this mass chaos is fueled in large part by the preceding events of Corona and all of this stuff. So yeah,
Sure.
it's a big one we could spend a lot of time on, and I won't keep you too long. I do want to maybe, I heard the 2 live Patreon ones. I listened to all you guys talking about. That
wow.
was ape shit, right? So I was kind of with you guys.
Election night live
I was
stream.
like,
Yeah.
holy shit, Trump's going to do it again. And then
I was pretty shocked that how close it was and how wrong the polls were again. You know.
now I didn't hear your newest one out, the main one. So
Mhm.
where are you and John, or what do you thinking happened? I mean, I don't think there was necessarily any fraud, but even George Stephanopoulos and all these news guys were saying the mail-in votes are going to win it for Biden. The mail-in votes are going to win it for Biden. And even on 528, Nate Silver's like mail-in ballots are 4-1 in favor of Biden. Just what are you kind of thinking on that process? Do you think that how do you account for so many of the mail-in ballots? Because that's essentially what happened, right? All the poll votes look like it was going for Trump, and then over the next few days they start doing all the mail-ins. And
Yeah.
you might have a little
Well,
more insight. You're a little more political than I am. I'm just what happened in your opinion?
yeah. Well, the problem is that we don't know what happened, right? I mean, that's the big problem. As far as what John thinks, you know, I mean, you know what John thinks.
Yeah, yeah,
He's like the Democrats stole it from Trump, you know.
yeah.
But and I don't know if that's true or not.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
it's as cut and dry as that.
it certainly isn't clear that that happened. In the sense that actually more people cast a vote for Trump in the swing states, and they stole those votes, and that's enough to tip the election. Like several things all have to be true in order for that to be true. Like it might be that there was some malfeasance, but like that malfeasance didn't actually change the result, right?
Yeah, okay.
That's fairly likely. That's fairly likely, right? Like you can
Yeah.
imagine someone, maybe like some freelancer, someone going off the reservation, or maybe someone taking orders from, you know, someone higher up. I don't know. Deciding to, you know, to harvest 400 ballots or something in some jurisdiction, but to imagine that happened
On the
in all of the
scale, yeah.
yeah, well, it would have to be like in Georgia and in Pennsylvania, you know, and in Wisconsin, or you know what I mean? It's like so maybe, but
Well,
that seems unlikely.
yeah, I don't think it's necessarily, direct intentional fraud. I mean, of course there could have been some of that, but just I guess I don't understand the system itself, that why so many mail-in ballots, favored the
Well,
Democrats so heavily. I guess that's something I don't understand, if why that would be 4-1, as Nate Silver said, in favor
so
of Biden.
right, so there's several things operating there too. I mean, wow. Okay, I'm going to try to answer this without having any like training as a political analyst or anything like that. So take all this with a grain of salt. Remember, I'm like basically a stand-up comic who's like interested in this stuff.
Oh yeah,
As a
and
fan.
just keep in mind I
Um,
have 12 subscribers, so it's
Okay,
a
awesome.
couple of people listening right now. So go nuts.
Hello to the dozen, the dirty dozen listening
Yeah,
right now.
there you go.
Yeah, so I think that one way of looking at that, right, and God, I mean, like, okay, so several things all happening at once. Coronavirus. Look, I mean, even already in the last couple of days, I've seen people who are like sort of like pro-Biden being like, well, I guess we can stop pretending about how bad it is,
Oh shit.
you know? So like and I think that like everybody knew, and it's sort of one of those things where like you could just feel it in the air, you could see it. You knew that a good chunk of the people who care about who pretend we're super caring about coronavirus, and we're throwing the numbers at Trump, like he's responsible for 240 million, or
Yeah,
thousand or
that's
whatever,
crazy.
which is ridiculous, right?
That's
Because
so
you have to
ridiculous.
compare it to like what would Hillary have done, or
Mhm.
what if some other world leader's done. And if you look, it's not like we have like some crazy number of deaths above like other countries that are like
Yeah,
westernized. You know what I mean? If like our numbers are like
exactly.
roughly comparable to the UK, which did like even more severe lockdowns, like then how can you really say that like we did it like wrong? It's like okay,
Exactly. There's not, yeah,
yeah,
there's no real point of reference, and like you're saying,
you can't run the
we don't
experiment.
have 3 million dead in our own, so there's no big
Yeah,
jump that would that would separate us from other methods, I guess, is what you're.
so you can't run that experiment. So you have to. So that's one thing is like the hype around coronavirus and like basically saying that we can't vote in person because it's too dangerous, which this is ridiculous. So that's one thing. Another thing is so another way to look at this thing is to say, well, this was actually like a massive get out the vote operation that was really more targeted towards like people who are on the Democratic side. So what they decided to do was to change the system and change how we vote at the 11th hour. And so then then it's like there's more room to cheat, because the rules aren't well established. And
Okay,
so
yeah.
whichever side is in charge of figuring out what the rules are has the advantage in that situation. So I mean, like, is it is it cheating if you rewrite the rules in such a way so that in your state it will be more likely that so that like Trump loses an edge or Biden gets an edge? I don't know. I mean, like politics has always been kind of dirty and all that kind of stuff,
Well,
and like
yeah.
certainly,
You can go farther out and realize this is a game. This is a this is
yeah.
which is why I kind of gravitate to you guys, and why I started it.
I
It's
I
way
mean,
too
sending
broad of a
out.
topic, but it's just like a lot of people are just disenfranchised with the whole system, and I think that's why you start getting folks looking
Yeah,
at.
sending out massive numbers of ballots to people in the mail, and then like it just certainly opens up like a can of worms when you've never done it before, right? It leaves the door open because now somebody knows that like all these ballots are like going to be like arriving in like mailboxes, and you can certainly like go by and like start like filling them out the way you want. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
a
it's
possibility that we should like try to figure out whether it happened or not. Um,
it's
it's
just an
important to know.
it's
I don't
it's it's a
know.
weakness. It's just an added it's an added weakness to the system, and I think even if there's not even direct fraud involved, but there's a big difference between someone who's very much wants to take part in the system as a citizen and vote, and they want to get up and put on their coat and go to a place and vote. It's when you just send stuff right to someone's lap, they can just be
Yes.
literally on their couch and just be like, okay, I guess I'll vote. And so
Yeah.
you're getting a shittier quality of voter, I think,
I I
left or
think
right.
I think I'd like to hear more people say things like that. I think that's correct. That there should be some kind of feeling of citizenship, like I'm going to like actually go to the place and like do my duty as a citizen.
It just seems
And
like
like
you're more vested in the process other
yes,
than.
yes. I agree with that. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. It's basically like a giant voter drive towards like people who are like less civically engaged and like lower information and maybe just like, oh yeah, like whatever, I heard Trump's racist, so like I guess Biden,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. And you just, you
rather
have
than
a.
people who are like going to do the homework and try to figure out like what's the, but yeah, and I, well, I don't know. On that point, by the way, I wanted to bring something up, which I guess a lot of people are talking about this, but it's something where I've gotten a lot of static from my friends on the left about this. They really don't want to hear it, but I mean, like, it seems like something that everyone should be talking about. That Donald Trump got more minority votes since any
Yes,
Republican president in 1960 since 1960,
that's
and
incredible.
when I pointed that out to someone, who, by the way, this is another thing people say, well, Trump is Hitler, and then I'm like, well, if it's Hitler, then you should steal the election from him, right? So
Yeah,
like, it also is like, if those are the stakes and like you actually believe that, then like, why wouldn't you steal an election? So like, that's kind of one thing to think about in terms of like the dangerousness of the rhetoric, and also, by the way, think about it like, if Trump is a fascist, then like, how could you vote him out? Like
Yeah,
if you vote a
exactly.
fascist out, then they don't leave. So
So it
so if he leaves, then he wasn't a fascist and you were wrong, and therefore your reason for voting him out was wrong. So it sort of undoes its
so
own logic.
yeah. So
Yeah. And I don't have like strong feelings really about either candidate. I kind of felt like I wanted to see what was going to happen if Trump won because I felt like he was his policy preferences and the direction he was taking things was really interesting. I think it's particularly interesting for California, by the way, and from sort of a lot of the places that are not on the coast, especially because Trump is well, anyway. So just going back to the idea, right? Like, so Trump got like this massive amount of Latino support in California, in Texas, in Florida, and also like a massive amount of black support. I mean, not in like sort of overall terms. I think he got something like 12% of the black vote.
well,
But
man,
like,
he
I don't think
had Ice Cube, Lil Wayne, all of these guys like backing up Trump.
I don't think anyone has gotten that much of the black vote who's a Republican since like Gerald Ford or something. I
Yeah,
mean,
something
it's like
crazy.
literally 40 years or something crazy. Yeah. So that's kind of wild. And the way, and I pointed that out to someone and they said, "Oh, you think that like just because like 12% of black people voted for Trump, he's not racist?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't make that claim.
Yeah, that's
The claim that I'm making is that like everybody spent 4 years screaming about how Trump is a white supremacist, and actually what happened? Well, the result of that was that fewer white people voted for him, and more black and brown people voted for him, and more gay people, by the way. So isn't there something wrong with the math there? Like, don't
yeah.
you have to factor that in some way, I guess? I mean, it means that like Trump somehow figured out a way by his policies or by his messaging to like reach out to a disaffected group of people who are minorities who have been voting with the Democrats because they felt like they had no other alternative. Um,
Well, I remember the Nas album back in I don't know the early 2000s. I mean, rappers used to rap about Trump, like like in a like this guy's the pimp, this guy's the shit. Like I'm Trump rich, I'm Trump ball. So
yeah.
I think that
Well, black men went for Trump at a rate of 1 out of every 6, which is also historically high.
wow, yeah.
So
So I don't know. I was I know this is kind of like a meme and a thing going around, kind of more conservative sides now, but the thing that where's all the Trump supporter protests, and yet they're
yeah, I
boarding up
mean,
cities getting ready for if Trump won, and
yes,
then that seemed nuts to me, and
it's just lies.
I'm
That
not
is, it's lies.
promoting militia groups or anything, but and I'm trying.
No, it's
You know
it's
me,
the
I'm not. It's just
it's the biggest lie. It's the biggest lie of all, right? Which is that there's a white supremacist civil war, some militia, Proud Boys, whatever your worst Nazi nightmare is, that's just waiting around the corner. And like, it's the craziest thing about that lie is that like it happened after an entire summer of like looting and burning by people who are on the left.
yeah,
And everybody knows, like everybody within the sound of my voice knows that if Trump currently, like if it was like Trump looks like was just ahead, it was a little bit of ahead and had just won the electoral college probably, but like Biden was now fighting it in the lawsuits, the country would be burning,
yeah,
and it wouldn't be
right.
people on the right burning it. And so like, what does it tell you? But like, the people who voted for Trump are actually like, I don't know, they're like being good citizens,
Well,
like they're not burning things down.
I know you guys have talked about this in different degrees several times, but just look at you and me. Okay, we were uh, liberal. We loved watching David Cross stand-ups. We talk about how
Yeah,
shitty Bush. Like
because
we
Bush is
were,
shitty
we were Democrat, and I know, and I'm still
and
very
more.
much a liberal and a Democrat in the
Yeah,
way of what did we want? It was simple. It's like, okay, gays get married. We want, pro-choice. We don't want war. I mean, there's a handful of things that I still believe in. I'm still very much anti-war, and I'm still very much, even if it disagrees with my personal beliefs, I'm very much pro-gay marriage. I'm very much pro people living their lives how they want to and loving them just
hmm
the same. And Trump
Sure.
was anti-war and everyone jumped on it. So it's like,
Yes.
I know you guys have
Yes.
touched on it, but it's like everything flipped. And
Everything flipped, and
some guys like us
literally,
were
we
just left
won.
out in the weeds,
We
kind of.
won is the thing, right? Like all of the liberal policy preferences that we had in 2004 became like so dominant that everyone agreed on them.
And then they had
And
nothing to
so
fight
there
or
was nothing to
something.
fight, so they had to start like finding like other things that like they, and it's like, well, no, we're using this strategy to win elections, so we have to keep finding people that are being victimized, even if like we have to look really hard for them, is that kind of thing. And Trump is like, a boorish like Twitter troll, so it like sort of he amped it up sometimes. But
Well,
yeah, I mean,
I like Trump, and again, I don't vote. I haven't ever. Some of that's because I was too
you're not
hammered and
allowed.
didn't care.
Just
No,
kidding.
I skipped it. Skipped all felonies. I've been in the clink a few times. I skipped that. But at first it was just because I didn't care, and now it's more like I don't care, but I'm sober. So there's like a different,
Right, right,
like
right. I mean,
it's
I sort of care. I don't know, but I'm not. I know I try not to care too much. I mean, I think also there's, maybe it's good if we stop caring about politics, and maybe Biden represents like let's care less about politics again, and maybe that's a good thing. I really don't have like I don't have strong feelings about Biden, and I think that's kind of the point, right? Everyone
yeah.
was like, let's have someone who we don't have strong feelings about again.
Well, it seems like even the media is kind of playing that up. I heard someone say Biden's slogan should be or something. You won't hear from me every day, and
Yeah, yeah,
I don't remember
that's
what I
good.
saw that on, but it was. I didn't hate Trump's policies because I thought they were by and large
Liberal,
fluttery and well, and
often liberal, oddly
liberal
enough.
and non-lasting. Like,
Mm,
again, I listened to a few things you guys may have touched on this, but I can reiterate it here. Is Bush did like lasting shit, like damage, like that
oh
we're
yeah,
still feeling today. And
right.
Trump really, once he's gone, he's gone. There's not going to be, he didn't fuck up things so bad that we're going to be dealing with the ramifications of it down the road. So, I mean, I can't look like
Yeah.
you don't hear about really terrorism or North Korea. You don't hear, I mean, I don't know what his lasting negative effects will be. I never really hated the guy because either
Look,
I
I didn't. I'm not a Trump supporter, and I didn't vote for him in 2016 or anything like that. And I was thought he was actually like going to be like super bad and authoritarian and Hitler, and I believed it. And then I watched him essentially make do foreign policy in the United States so well that like we didn't even have to talk about foreign policy anymore because there were no concerns about it any longer. That's insane. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. Like that he succeeded so well that like foreign policy is just like not the main thing that we were talking about since like 9/11
you just
was
don't
foreign policy.
hear anything
You don't
about in
you
the
don't have to think
news
about
or
it.
yeah.
I mean, he solved the problem. Like it's crazy, man. Like
Yo, see Trump I thought if he won again would cause more visual damage from the left. I mean, it's
mm,
like how much blame can you put on him? He was definitely inflaming things. I'm not saying it was bad. I'm not saying that the left and or not even the left, just people who didn't like him did not react how they were entitled to react. But I think the Biden Harris thing is going to be much calmer. But to quote, not Tim Pool, the big fat comedian Tim, he's like,
Tim Dillon.
Tim Dillon, I love that guy. He
Yeah,
was
he's
like,
great.
the Harris thing's going to be, Biden Harris is going to be calmer, but they're going to put the chips in our brain. It's like, I think it's going to be
Right.
slower, but I definitely don't like the long term like implications and policies that I think will come from the deep left. Now,
I think
maybe
that's
if
true.
Biden wants to stay kind of mundane in the middle, as long as he's with us, God bless him, probably won't be that long,
Mhm.
then honestly, like there's a tweet I put out, I don't know, way back. I think you liked or commented. I said, I will vote for Biden right now if I get a promise in writing from the cathedral that it'll end COVID. So I was kind of falling into that, like, I'm ready for a break, but I feel like our complacency will lead to worse like policy down the road. I think it'll be calmer
Yeah.
but more damaging. I think Trump would have been more damaging and visual at first, but in the long run, it wouldn't have been a bad. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Well, my experience was that, like I watched the sense-making apparatus like completely like stop working. And that was like super evident, right? Like in 2016 when like Trump won and to everyone's surprise, right? It was like, oh yeah, everyone was wrong. You didn't know what you were talking about. And then, but I was also like, well, yeah, but like, so what? Like it's just an election. Like it doesn't really matter very much. And, but then like I watched this, like sort of, like you said, very like subtle thing that happened. And I saw it in the terms of political correctness because I was doing stand-up comedy. And it was this like constant thing of like, this criticism where it'll be, people would say like, well, of course you would say that, you're white, or like, that sounds like what a white male would say. And like this sort of like shutting down the speech thing that was like happening, that was weird. And then I saw like the critical race theory stuff come up more and more.
yeah.
Yeah, and like sort of this sort of very insidious thing. And I was like, I guess maybe some of this stuff matters because like there are certainly people who have an interest in power who are like trying to get people to see reality a certain way. And it's definitely a way that I recognize because I came out of the Christian fundamentalist side and seeing all this like language policing stuff, which
Oh
I got
yeah.
from like church ladies all the time. And I was like, I don't think that's actually like the best way of doing things, and certainly splitting people up into different identity groups. And it's like I was like a little bit concerned about that. But then COVID happened, and I was like, oh wow, because like actually like now that our sense-making apparatus doesn't work, and we have to make an actual decision together as a country about this and what to do about it, we can't do it, and that's a big problem. And then I watched like cities burn, and everyone blamed Trump for it. And I said, oh, actually, like this is probably like a problem, like that we're
Yeah.
seeing things like that, or like people going out and like standing on their lawn because like people like rioters were coming through, and then like the people that were like trying to defend their houses get arrested. And I was like,
They're the ones who are demonized. Like,
yeah, I was
yeah.
like, maybe it does matter if we have a sense-making apparatus to function. So I guess I worry that you're right, that like maybe we won't notice it for a while, but like that kind of creep will happen more. But I do think people are paying more attention to it, and maybe that's ultimately like Trump's legacy, is that like he did manage to surface some of those issues about things like critical race theory, for example, just to pick one example, and have people say, no, like that's actually probably not such a good idea because actually it turns out it's racist, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
literally like like critical race theory is literally like identitarian racism.
Yeah.
So to like say that it is like a good thing, or like just sensitivity training, I think, which is what one of the debate questioners called it,
Oh yeah.
is probably something that we should point out that that's wrong. So maybe the next person that comes along to run will have to pay attention to those issues because maybe people now notice them. So that might be a good thing.
Well, I even noticed on the news, they were blaming Trump, of course, but they almost came close to identifying a problem when they said, we have lost a lot of trust with the people. And of course, then they went and said, Trump lied to everyone, and that's why nobody trusts us. But underneath that, you could hear that they're like, oh shit, we're not going to if people can't trust us at all, like where I'm kind of at right now, it's like I don't believe anything because I don't trust anyone. I don't trust any news. And if you're a news organization and you get to that point, you're going to, start to lose money if nobody believes you or trusts you. So he did raise a lot of awareness, be it either through, the media accusing him of, demonizing the media or whatever. Whatever the point is, a lot of people, liberals and, Republicans, are wary. At least I think a percentage of them are, at least on both sides, are kind of questioning the news and kind of questioning, what they're feeding us. Maybe that's just coming from the right, but it seems like Trump did open the eyes to what the media does and what it does. And so
well, I think that you're right, and I think that my experience from a lot of my my friends, some of them are kind of like younger too, like early 20s, and you know, and people of lots of different backgrounds and stuff. I mean, I've heard this from, you know, not just like straight white males, you know, but from people of like every color and religion and all different kinds of things. Um, and is that they don't trust the media, and and that there's this, you know, there's this very clear sense that, like, I think people have this feeling right now that I heard Victor Davis Hanson describe it as being in a monastery of the mind, where, you know, you if you turn on Netflix, you know, to just like relax and watch a movie, it's like that movie's probably is going to be like framed in such a way that it has a political message,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And the political message is like, these people are good and these people are bad. This group of people, you know, and it's of course the bad people are always straight white male or whatever,
Hmm.
some version of that, and the good people are always going to be like a person of color or like some minority or whatever like that, and then that's just like this filter, you know, that everything has to fit into, or it's not like saleable according to like the cultural producers in
Okay,
our world.
yeah.
And the media is cultural production too, right? I mean, we know that for sure because when we were kids, there was just the news was just, you know, it was at 6 p.m. and like Peter Jennings would come
Yeah.
on and say, here's like the 30 minutes of the news, and then bye bye, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, it was on to
And now,
Jeopardy. You listen to Dan
right,
Rather, then you're on to Wheel of Fortune.
yeah, right. And now news has had to fill up a 24-hour stream of consciousness of every little thing that happens, and now it's times, you know, 4 networks, and now it's times, you know, 40,000 YouTube channels that also are covering the same thing. So like, you know, the desire for news and for like news about culture and all that kind of stuff just keeps growing. And I mean, that's sort of also like an opportunity, obviously, because I think you and I know, and probably people listening to this, you know, I assume that they're getting a lot of their information from like podcasts, you know, from listening to the people who I like most, who are generally disaffected liberals,
Yes.
or you know, or like skeptical conservatives. Like, I mean, I don't listen to any, you know, traditional liberals or traditional conservatives anymore. You know, I mean, but I definitely want to know what Sam Harris thinks, or Brett Weinstein thinks, or Eric Weinstein. You know, I'm interested in what Steven Pinker has to say.
Yes.
I like the guests that Dave Rubin has on. You know, like obviously Joe Rogan, Tim
Yeah.
Dillon, like that. So like that, there's definitely a real opportunity there, and those media personalities are stepping in to fill that gap. And like what they're selling is, we're not bullshitting you anymore. You know, we're actually trying to just look at our world and see what we see, and that's pretty powerful.
It is awesome to see this rise of course, they call it the IDW or whatever, which I think sounds cool, so I like it. But you are seeing these figures getting these millions of followers and views who are, you know, presenting something in a way that people can make up their own minds, and so that is definitely a bright light, a silver lining,
Yeah,
in the
and
future.
yeah, and I think that, you know, I never really picked up this thread, but it was just trying to like make some point about California. But I guess what I was thinking about was, you know, I mean, I think that California is really interesting because it's so split. You know, I think people don't really understand California. They don't understand the NorCal SoCal split. But obviously, like that split isn't as important anymore, right? The real split in California is between the coasts and the inland.
I'm in a
And
very Trump area in California. I am in a small mountain
and
town
and
full of hunters and construction workers.
And I bet if you told like the average person in like Atlanta, Georgia that, or Miami, Florida, they would be like, what? I thought California was like just like literally nothing but like Hillary, Biden,
Yeah.
Kamala, you know. They'd probably think you're like a tech billionaire or something, you
Yeah, the
know. They
whole
don't understand. Yeah. So like people
well,
don't, and of course, vast numbers of people in California also are like Latino and voted in second generation, third generation, fourth generation Latino, and a lot of those people voted for Trump,
they did.
you know,
Well, I know
especially
a
on the
lot
inland.
personally. I mean, I grew up
Yeah.
here. I've worked you know, as
And
you
some of them
know,
want very strong borders, you know.
well they do, and they're conservative spiritually, religiously. They
And they think
are, you know,
they're pro-life, exactly. Yeah.
so it's a weird mix. You know, surrounded by white old MAGA guys, and we have a huge immigrant, and it's a very strange area. Yeah, people, it's not just surfing and Democrats here. It's
and so, right, and so you hear about Gavin Newsom, shutting down the state, and and some people hear that, like John, for example, my partner in crime on the other podcast, he's like, good, they deserve it, and I'm like, well, Gavin Newsom is ruling with an iron fist from Sacramento, but like, there's vast territory in California where people, I can only imagine, are like screaming, like, what the fuck, you don't speak for me, like, why do you get to decide?
Yeah, it's the hate towards Newsom is palpable in my specific region. I mean,
yeah, and I figured that my guess, and I didn't look at the final numbers, but my guess was that places like New York, California, Michigan, I thought Michigan would go Trump, like sheerly because of the lockdown measure.
Yeah.
I thought that you would have a massive red wave there just for that reason. And California, I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'm gonna guess. I was wrong about Michigan, so who knows? But I'm gonna guess that Trump didn't lose by as much as he did California normally. Yeah.
Well, with the whole Corona thing, and it's like it's a poor population for the most part. A lot of, at least small towns like mine, and it was hard for us because we were in that population that's like, we got to work, like we have to work to feed our families, so it's just a weird region. Yeah, definitely. It's some of us just, for whatever reason, weren't getting the stimulus, or it wasn't enough, and so you have this mix of, well, we were kind of in that camp of we just wanted to work, but, and try not to look like ignorant assholes who are just, ignoring science. And it was kind of like, we don't have time for this shit. And a lot of areas like mine is like, we don't have time for this.
Right.
So.
Well, and I mean, and I was really lucky, to end up here in Florida, because I almost ended up in New York, and I ended up here instead. And I didn't vote for the governor of Florida, DeSantis. I voted for his opponent, the Democrat, who would have been the first black governor of Florida. And I was like, that's kind of cool. And I just thought, like, yeah, like, let's have some, we've had Rick Scott in here, and I really like him. He's like pro-prison and all, just like liberal, So, and then DeSantis turned out to be like the best governor in the state, maybe. I mean, he opened up things faster. He said, we're not going to lock down even if cases go back up. We're gonna take it like a man, basically. Like, it's gonna be tough, but like, stiff upper lip. Let's move forward. We're Floridians. Let's get this. And we've actually been fine. Is the craziest thing. And it was actually very funny to watch, like, the media predict like the demise of like places like Georgia and Florida that like opened up like sooner, and then to have us just like kind of come back as like economic powerhouses and be like pretty much fine. Like our death rates are the same. They haven't gone up. It's just been like a flat line, no matter what the policy was. Lockdown, not lockdown, still like no change.
It always just shakes out the same. It just seems like it always shakes out the same. So
that's been nice.
Yeah. And here it's just, well, I don't know. You watch the news. It's we weren't so affected, almost because. Well, I worked also. I mean, like I said, the people I work for had the best summer they ever had. We had like our district like representatives saying we're not doing this. So you have these, where you can open up. We had even law enforcement like kind of thinking this is so. In these small kind of communities, there was almost like a spirit of anarchism a little bit through some of our district supervisors are saying. We were told
self-determination, at least.
Yes,
right. Like regional self-determination. Yeah.
And you can get that in these small kind of communities where nobody's busting you.
California's
basically
too big. That's the problem.
Yeah.
California should be split up into like multiple states. It's kind of crazy that it's so different and so diverse, and yet like you have the same policies for everyone.
Yeah. I was always kind of I thought that was kind of a stupid idea. Always like. When I lived up in Humboldt or in the the Bay, is like we need to be our own state, But now I'm starting to see that, yeah, give us 2, maybe 3. Like,
Right.
give us something here.
Yeah, like inland California and then coastal California. Hey, you get the 2 more Republican senators,
Yeah.
I tell you what, you get Puerto Rico and then you get inland California. Let's make it even,
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
That's fair. I'll take it.
Yeah. 52 state flag. There you go.
Yeah. So,
But no matter what, like right, like here's the thing about all this political nonsense, is like it's gonna kind of calm down, I think, because I think it has to, because first of all we've just had enough, and there's been this like, we've been like jerking each other off. I don't know if this is like a family show, but
you get
and we're
free speech here,
okay.
baby.
Okay, so now we've been edging here, and now we're finally gonna like blow our load, and so like we can't get it up for a while, I think, and I think people are tired of politics. But here's the thing, man. The people who are super like super high concern about politics, right? Where like that's their entire lives. If they've been deriving all their meaning and all of their everything from basically just, this like dark star in the sky, which is Donald Trump, and now he's gone. What are their lives about now?
Well, that was you just kind of covered. I wanted to, it's like when your whole life is when your whole life is, based around this, or even a lot more of this you see on the left, just this whole culture of victimhood and oppression, and just,
Yeah.
it's just it's not a sustainable model for anyone or anything. I mean, you can't
Right.
build anything on weakness, I don't think. And so I agree, a lot of people are tired, but for someone who has nothing else in their life, like they're going to, they need to be oppressed or fighting or something. I don't know exactly how to put it, but I still think we are going to have issues, because people who thrive on this kind of culture. I don't know. I see it calming down initially, but I feel like, especially the farther left you go, I think it's a hunger that's not going to be satiated. I mean, I don't think there's any top to it.
Yeah, I mean that's the question, right? Can something else fill the vacuum? I guess it sort of has to, because it's just like the nature of being human. You have to keep finding something. But like this really gets to like, it's a nice way of coming back to where we started, because one thing that I've absolutely noticed during this time of sort of heightened concern about politics is that the people who I know who are people of faith, and whether those are people who are in a 12-step recovery program where they have a higher power, or whether it's people who are sort of traditionally Christian, or Muslim, or who I have Buddhist friends and Muslim friends,
Mm-hmm. And me
Jewish
as well.
friends,
Me as well.
yeah, Jewish friends who are religious, So like the people who have that faith in their life, and that's what they center their lives around. All this, they have opinions. They're like, well, this policy is good, this policy is bad. But it doesn't control their minds. It doesn't control their lives. They have a center, a moral center, a spiritual center that guides them, and that Biden can be president, Trump can be president, and they still get meaning out of life either way. And I think that's really, it keeps you sane, and it gives you something. I don't know. I don't know how. I watched a lot of people go quietly insane, and now that they've taken away the thing that's been like manifesting their insanity, I don't think they're just going to suddenly become sane.
Exactly.
They're going
Yeah.
to have to find something else.
They're going to have to, quote unquote, fill the God hole or whatever. Yeah. I think you as an individual and as a society, you have to have a rock. You have to have some kind of core. You have to have some version. And I also have friends of all faiths, and I love them all, and I respect their faith. Because if you just have some kind of core of objective morality, whatever it is, I think that's a great place to start. If you have something that's, solid in you, I guess. I mean, that's kind of what you're saying. So when you don't have that, you feel like a victim, because you are in a lot of ways, and you just, propagate that, and you just, I don't know. I think, the people with some kind of core, be it Hindu or Buddhism or Christianity or Islam, I think are going to do better in the upcoming years because you have something to grab onto that to you feels real, that feels like I can use this in my decision making, I can use this in my life. So
Yeah, and I think it goes to the issue of identity politics too, in the sense that like if let's say that if you're a Christian, right, then you believe that all human beings are God's children, and that we're all equal, like equally valid, equally part of God's creation, um, equally have the opportunity for salvation, right? There's just a basic equality, and like when the civil rights movements were happening in 60 years ago in this country, like there's no accident that like everything from abolitionism to like Martin Luther King and all that stuff, there was always a Christian core to it. It grew out of Christianity, and that's not like just some accident. That's not just a coincidence. Like there's a reason. I think that came out of that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that today people talk about identity politics and like equality or equity or like let's have everyone be the same, and they're just like picking that value as if it's like a value that they like have determined is good,
yeah, okay, yeah,
as opposed to a value that's like they have within themselves because they believe in some higher power or some authority that like makes it mandatory for us to be fully embracing our humanity and connected to other people, right? Like if equality is mandatory because you view every other person as an interconnected being in the Buddhist sense or a child of God in like a monotheistic sense, then like it's just coming from a much deeper and more sustainable place.
yes,
It's not this like political, aesthetic that you can like change because it's popular now. And like that's really the source of like the opportunity for like, anti-racism, if you want to call it that,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
But also for that same reason is when you hear like the critical race theory stuff, and then it's like, well, wait a minute, this is actually racist. Like people who have that faith, I think they're able to see it a little bit faster for that reason too. So yeah, and I mean, I've said to John on the podcast, I'm sure you've heard me say this, but I've said many times that like sometimes I think that our discourse has degraded to such a point that the only thing that's going to be able to save us is a worldwide a great awakening, like literally like some kind of religious or spiritual revolution, where people all of a sudden decide to like it could be polytheistic, like it doesn't matter, but like people have to like start deriving their sense of meaning from something outside, something that just comes from man and
yeah.
aesthetics and other human beings and political discourse. It's got to be something spiritual, something that's pre-rational, non-rational, that comes from places that we can't explain and that connects us to everyone else. It's got to happen.
Well, Ethan, I think that's a great message maybe to wrap this up on here a little bit. I don't want to keep you too long. Um, this has been great. I mean, thank you so much. Um,
Well, you're welcome, man.
I really
It's been great to
appreciate
be here.
having you on, and I think that's some good and some hope. There's some hope. I do
Yeah,
think,
I'm an optimist.
yeah, and I like that
I'm
about you, and I greatly appreciate the stuff you guys put out, and it's good to hear an optimist. It's good to hear someone who, like me as well. I have hope. I think we're gonna, somehow figure out how to be okay. But I do think it's got to, we got to stop deriving so much of that from ego and from, victimhood and all this stuff. So
Yeah, that'd be nice.
yeah, but who knows? Maybe it's
Well, cool.
maybe this is the
That-
beginning of the end, and it's all downhill from here. But hopefully not.
Well, it's one day at a time, right? So,
Yeah, hey, that's what they tell us, right? So,
So, okay, well, thanks so much, Thad. I really appreciate it.
and
If
Ethan,
people should, can
I
I pimp
was
out
gonna
my?
say, please pimp
Yeah,
out your show where people can follow you at, what you do.
sure. So, yeah, I hope I'll be going back to doing stand up someday. That's sort of on hold for the time being. But you can definitely follow me on Twitter. I try to be funny on there. It's at Ethan is not funny, which is a joke because I'm hilarious. No, I try to be interesting and funny on there. You can also listen to like the podcast that Thad keeps referencing. It's called Mean and Sober. Mean and Sober. So like you'd probably just look up on any podcast client that you like, and you can get it there. And we do have like a Patreon if we do like extra episodes. If people are interested in that, just go to Patreon.
That's fantastic too. If you guys are listening, the Patreon's where it's at. The original show's great, but there's some
deep cuts.
So there's some colorful deep cuts on the Patreon, which
for sure,
which are really good. And I want to thank you again, and I do suggest everyone check it out. You guys helped me start looking at this and wanting to get into it, and inspired me a little bit to maybe get my point of view out there. So, Ethan, this has been great. I just really appreciate it, and I hope you guys have enjoyed, listening to us and listening to Ethan, and we hope to maybe. Not necessarily with Ethan, but I like this interview thing. Maybe we can get some other people on. So, again, thank you guys for listening. As I always say, go with God, and we'll see you on the next one.
Oh, Lord, please bring me shelter. Please bring me shelter from yonder storm. Shelter from yonder storm. Oh, sun, won't you shine on me? Won't you shine on me when the rain has come? Oh, sun, won't you shine on me? Won't you shine on me?